Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome to Before Amber, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Lady Amy. So, have you ever had a gut feeling, a premonition, if you will, that came true? Well, Kathy Hobbs had a big one that came true. Catherine Hobbs was born on April 20th, 1971, in Oakland, California, to Wayne and Vivian Hobbs. I'm sure it wasn't all bad, but Kathy's mom said that Kathy didn't have a happy childhood. Her parents divorced when she was just 8 years old, and it was hard on her because she was very close to her dad but lived with her mom. When she was in middle school, one of her very best friends died from heart disease. These things were truly awful, yes, but I'm sure there was good in her life as well. She was loved and taken care of. However, when she was young, she started telling people and truly believing this, that she wasn't going to live to the age of 16. She truly feared this, and the death of her friend only made it worse. She isolated herself and was very much an introvert, which isn't a bad thing. I'm an introvert myself. Her mom, Vivian, really worried about her daughter. So after her friend died and Kathy's fear of death got worse, her mom decided that maybe if they moved from Oakland, it might give Kathy a new start and help ease her worries. So they packed up and moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. This move seemed to be good for Kathy. She made new friends and was getting out and being social again. She seemed to really be enjoying life. But as it got closer to Kathy's 16th birthday, she started isolating herself again. This time, even worse. About 2 months before her birthday, she stopped leaving the house. She really hardly left her room. She was truly scared that she was going to die before she turned 16. But on the morning of her 16th birthday, she woke up very much alive. Her mom and little sister said that she came out of her room happy, relieved, and even shocked that she was alive. They said she said, quote, "Mom, I did it. I made it to 16. I didn't think I'd live to be 16." End quote. This was a big relief for Kathy. She was happy and glad. Her fear was wrong. She started living and making plans for the future. She was socializing more and decided that she wanted to be a beautician and open her own salon someday that she was going to call Cat's Cuts. Kathy was still somewhat of an introvert, so she enjoyed spending time alone reading books. On the night of July 23rd, 1987, Kathy finished the book that she had been reading and wanted to get a new one. This was around 11 p.m. at night, a strange time to go to the store for a new one, but it was Vegas after all, and it is a 24-hour town. So according to Vivian, this wasn't that strange. It was something that Kathy had often done, many times before, maybe not for a book, but she would go to the store late. Normally teens were hanging out by the pool, so Kathy told her mom that she might stop and hang out for a little bit, and she wouldn't be home right away. So she might be asleep before she got home. She gave her mom a kiss and left. But unlike most nights, there were no teens hanging out by the pool. If there was, one probably would have walked to the store with Kathy like they often did. But just because no one was out, this didn't stop Kathy. She still decided to go. She and Vivian both felt that it was very safe after all, and the store was only 1.5 blocks away, so super close. Since Kathy had told her she wasn't going to be straight home, Vivian did end up going to bed before Kathy was home. Vivian said that around 3 a.m. something strange happened. She woke up from a dead sleep and said it felt like something had hit her on the head. Then she got this overwhelming feeling of peacefulness, and the thought crossed her brain of, "It's over now." And then she went back to sleep. She didn't think anything of it at the time. The next morning, Vivian got up and found that Kathy wasn't in her room. She wasn't in the apartment at all. She hadn't come home. She started looking for her and asking friends and neighbors, but no one had seen her. After learning that no one had gone with her to the store the night before, she contacted the police and reported her missing. Unlike most cases, the police didn't think she was a runaway. Lieutenant Kyle Edwards of the Las Vegas Metro Police said that within the first day they had tracked down friends and family, teamed up with the media to get her picture out there, and by the second day they were convinced that Kathy had been abducted. Volunteers and officers set up organized search for Kathy, but nothing turned up. They did find a clerk from the store that confirmed and remembered Kathy that night, and when police went through the store's records, they found that someone did in fact purchase a paperback book at 11:17 p.m. on the night of July 23rd. So the police now had a better timeline. She did in fact make it to the store, but went missing sometime after 11:17 between the store and her apartment. This store was on the corner of Desert Inn and Maryland Parkway. Police said it was a very busy intersection. Even if you are to look at it now from satellite views or even ground views, it is still a very busy intersection. Police didn't understand how no one saw her leave the store, or that no one saw anything at all, really. Police kept having the media push Kathy's disappearance to try to stir up any information that they could. 9 days after she went missing, a man named Richard was in the desert near Lake Mead looking for rock crystals. To some true crime people, it might kind of seem weird, a man out walking in the desert alone, but it really wasn't. Sources say that he was a geologist, so this was something he often did. When he was walking back to his car, he said he smelled something awful and decided to check out what it was. When he did, he found the body of a young woman. He said he was so shocked and it was the most horrifying thing he had ever seen. He had to sit down for a second to chill his nerves and find his bearings. For reference, Lake Mead is about an hour away from Las Vegas. Once Richard got himself together and calmed down, he drove to the nearest ranger station and brought them back to the body. Police were then called. Lieutenant Edwards said that within 20 minutes of arriving, they knew that it was Kathy. Her body was about 150 to 200 feet from the road. There were tire tracks that showed that a car had driven there and turned around, then left again. They also found 2 rocks that had blood on them near Kathy's body. The blood was tested and showed to be the same blood type as Kathy. It was determined that Kathy had died from multiple hits to her head. Most likely the rocks found near her. About a month after Kathy died, they found letters in her room to each of her family members, saying things like, she loved them and not to be sad, she knew she wasn't going to grow up, and to always remember her. That's both sad and chilling. On October 24th, so about 3 months after she disappeared, the police got a tip on their answering machine. It was from a man that said they had seen a girl being taken by 2 men and forced into a car. She was screaming, and he said that one of them was named Robbie. The caller said that this happened a few months ago, but he had been out of town for the last few months, which is why he was just now reporting it. He described the car, and he told them that he had a license plate number. Not all the details from this recording have been made public, so I'm sure there might be more to it. This was the break that police needed. They ran the plate, but it turned out to be a number that didn't exist. Police were devastated. This was the only big lead they had had so far. So they reached out to Unsolved Mysteries for help. You know, the famous show that gives Gen X and X-Nulls nightmares? Legit, I get chills when I hear the music or Robert Stack's voice. This episode was actually one of the main sources for our story. The hope was that 1, they would get more tips, and 2, they could plead to the caller to call back. They could still remain anonymous, they just wanted more information. To this day, the caller has never come forward, so the case went cold. In March of 1988, a man named Michael Lee Lockhart was arrested in Texas after stealing a car and killing a police officer. That was just a few things that he did. He had also been charged with killings of others in other states. He claimed that he had killed 20 to 30 people. He was found guilty first in Texas for killing Officer Paul Hulsley Jr. Then he was convicted in Indiana for another murder of a teenage girl, and then he pleaded guilty for another murder in Florida. Since Texas was the first to try him and find him guilty, they would be the ones that would sentence him to death. Why am I telling you about Lockhart? Well, he was a serial killer whose crimes spread across the country. While on his crime spree, Lockhart was found to be in Las Vegas at the time of Kathy's murder. He had been known to abduct and murder teen girls. The stolen car he was driving matched the description of the car that the mystery caller had described in his message. Some reports, I haven't been able to fully confirm, say that there were also fibers found on or near Kathy that matched interior fibers of the stolen car that he was driving. These things led to making Lockhart the prime suspect in Kathy's murder. Though her murder is still classified as unsolved, many believe that Lockhart did it and it's considered solved. There are no official reports, but supposedly when Lockhart was in prison, he was asked about Kathy's death and confessed to killing her. How true this is, we will never know. Lockhart was executed in the state of Texas on December 9, 1997. Kathy lived to be 16 years, 3 months, and 3 days. It seems that her gut feeling or premonition was pretty correct. She made it to 16, but she didn't make it past 16. I feel and think, as does her mom, that the feeling and dream Vivian had had that night was a connection to her daughter's murder. Maybe she felt it happen because they had such a close bond, but this is just an opinion. That is all for Kathy's story. Now I have a second story for you today, and this one's an old one. like really old. It starts in the 1800s. Back in this time, newspapers and town gossip were pretty much the only way to know what was happening. There wasn't TV or radio, very few people, only the very wealthy had phones. It was a totally different time. Imagine the power being out for days or weeks, and the only way to communicate with the outside world was through articles in the newspaper or snail mail. Keep this in mind during the story. George Wilhite was born in 1890 to Alta Albert Wilhite and his wife Mattie Jewel Cook in Emporia, Kansas. Sadly, due to complications during childbirth, Mattie lost her life. Alta was distraught and devastated by the loss of his wife. He couldn't take care of George on his own. Being heartbroken and not knowing how to handle a child, he left George in the care of Mattie's mom, Sarah Lewis. Alta moved to Kansas City to take on a federal job. Today, these two towns are about an hour-and-a-half drive apart. Not that big of a deal, but back then it wasn't as easy. Remember, cars had only been invented just a few years before George was born. The main way someone would travel was by train, so it wasn't as if Alta could just drive back on the weekends. Though it wasn't written in any articles I read, I am sure that he did travel back to see his son as much as he could. However, each week he did write and send money back for George's care. It wasn't like he didn't love his son. It was just a hard time. He had to make money for the two of them, and he just couldn't take care of George and do this at the same time. Around 1893, Alta learned some news. He had been in Oklahoma for a little while, probably for business, and when he came back to Emporia to visit his son, he learned that Sarah was no longer living there. A friend of hers had said that she left under mysterious circumstances and that George was gone too. Alta immediately quit his job and took to looking for his son as a full-time thing. He followed the trace of them to Ohio, but lost it there. He put out ads in newspapers across the country. He contacted police in every state for help. He offered a $500 reward, which is about $13,000 to $14,000 today, but none of that helped. He said he followed hundreds of clues, but he couldn't find George or Sarah anywhere. There are a few reports that said that Sarah had made comments about taking the boy and running away, which is what it seems like she did. Time passed, and Alta remarried and started a new family. He never gave up on finding George, though. In 1929, a man named Forrest Bixler went to the Beacon Journal office for help and to tell them his story. He said he remembered being very young and being coaxed away from his home in Kansas by a man named Alfred Bixler. They were then joined by another man and a woman, and they all set off in a wagon. Forrest told the reporters he remembered the woman told him to always call Alfred father and her mother. Her name was Emma. In 1894, Emma died, and Forrest and Alfred, a.k.a. father, moved to Hartsville, where they lived until Forrest was 15, and then they moved to Kent, Ohio, to work on a farm. Forrest had no memories of his own family. He just knew that this wasn't really it. He wanted to know who and where his real family was. After they moved to Kent, it was reported that Alfred left, showed back up once or twice, and then never returned. In 1923, Forrest married, and his wife was the one that actually talked him into going to the Associated Press for help. One thing he did remember was the name Jewel, but he didn't know why. The paper took his story and ran with it. They sent it to papers all across the country, and letters immediately started coming in. Alta read the story, and he knew he had to write the paper. His letter said, quote, "My wife died January 1st, 1890, in Emporia, Kansas, the same day my boy was born, and in the fall of 1892, my wife's mother stole my boy, and I followed them to Columbus, Ohio, but was never able to get any clue to their whereabouts. From there, I have advertised and followed up on hundreds of clues, but have never been able to find my son. Now, if you know this man, please let him read this letter, as it might be the means of a father finding his son. I have a picture of him when he was 18 months old. My son's name was George Wilhite. My wife's name was Mattie Jewel Wilhite. I am 59 years old and have lived in Kansas all my life, and would like to find my son, if he is still living. Please help me if you can. An anxious father, yours very respectfully, A.A. Wilhite." End quote. There are many letters that seem promising, but this one really stuck out. The times and the locations were all the same, and the name Jewel was there. So Forrest wrote back. Now, these letters weren't actually just going between the two of them. They were actually also getting printed in the papers so everyone could see the story happening. They went back and forth for a little while. They asked each other questions. They sent pictures, which were also printed in the paper. Finally, after getting answers from each other, Forrest decided to go see Alta face to face. They were both hopeful, but Alta's health wasn't in the greatest and he didn't think he could make the trip to Kent, so Forrest went to see him. As soon as they met, they embraced in a hug and they both said they knew right away that they were father and son. After 37 years, Alta finally had answers and his boy back. They were actually met up just before Father's Day of that year. Alta lived a few more years until he passed away in 1933. I'm sure he spent as much time as he could with Forrest and his family in those few years. As soon as they hugged, Forrest decided to change his name back to George Wilhite. George passed away in 1953. Alta said that he didn't know Alfred or Emma Bixler, but he learned that they lived 2 doors down from Sarah. He thinks that Sarah came up with the plan to give them George and then just disappear at the same time. But being someone that thinks true crime like, I wonder if the Bixlers actually did something to Sarah. I couldn't find anything else about her anywhere. George said he didn't have any memories of her. If you want to read more of these letters, there's several of them printed in old newspapers that you can find on newspapers.com. Thank you so much for listening. I hope all the dads out there had a wonderful, memorable Father's Day this past weekend. That's all for both cases today. If you don't already, please like, follow, or subscribe depending on where you listen, and leave a 5-star review as it really does help the podcast grow. If you have a case you want us to cover, please email me at beforeamberpod@gmail.com. You can also follow the show across all social media. We will be back in 2 weeks to remember someone else. Until next time, thanks for listening. Later. Just a reminder, as always, people of interest and suspects in these cases are innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. All sources are listed in our show notes, but some of those sources include newspapers.com, Akron Beacon Journal, Unsolved Mysteries, Season 1, Episode 16, findagrave.com, and the Chicago Tribune. Thanks again. Later.